all he had to say about it was, "I don't know, it looks nicer." There we have our expert opinion. It looks nicer. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the new Fenty Pro Filt'r Hydrating Longwear Foundation. As you'll have already seen in my first impressions video, which I'll link up here in case you missed it, I got the shade 110 Cool based on the Sephora shade match recommendation, and it was a disaster. After trying the shade for a second time, I decided that there was no way that I would be able to accurately review the foundation with such a wrong match. So I did go to Sephora and pick up 2 additional shades in 150 and 160. This first shade is the shade 110 Cool, and in the middle is shade 150 Neutral, and at the end is shade 160 Cool. I wore shade 110 Cool for days 1 and 2. On day 3, I wore 160 Cool. And on days 4, 5, 6, 7, and in today's video, I'm wearing the shade 150. Though in today's video, I did mix 150 and 110. So if I'm looking a little bit light, that's why. On day 1, I used my fingers to apply the foundation. This is not the way that Fenty Beauty recommends applying foundation, but this is the way that I most often apply my foundation, so I decided to give it a shot. In other days, I did use the Real Technique brush, Sigma F80 flat top kabuki, the super sponge, and the beauty blender. I wanted to give this foundation a real shot, so I did wear it for 7 days, and most of the wear tests were 10 hours or longer. Jumping in to day 1. Day 1 is something you have already seen with the first impressions video, so I won't go too in depth with that. I used my fingers and it was the wrong shade. On day 2, I did go in with the same shade 110 Cool, and I was able to adjust a little bit of my routine after seeing how it reacted to other products during the first impression. I did heavily bronze my face. I tried to use the Fenty Beauty bronzer in the first impression to warm up my face, and it really didn't work. So I used the Hourglass ambient lighting powder in the shade Radiant Light, and I felt that it really did a nice job. Day 2 is one of the 3 days that I did really like my foundation. Overall, I've been really happy with how my makeup wore. I really like this whole kind of getup that I had going on. I just don't know that I couldn't achieve this same look with a different foundation, heavily set with Hourglass powder. On day 3, I wore the shade 160 Cool. This shade was almost as big of a disaster as the 110 shade because it oxidized so much that I looked so Oompa Loompa-like by the end of the day. I had one of the worst makeup days of my life. Day 4, I had learned to go in with shade 150. I did nothing else to my makeup that day. It was literally just eyebrows, eyeshadow, mascara, lipstick, and foundation. I don't think there's any other foundation that I've had this much of a difficulty with. Day 4's foundation was also one of the 3 days that I really liked how I looked. If I wanted a light coverage foundation, that would probably be something that I would reach for. Day 5, I did a wear test doing half my face with the kabuki brush and the other half using the super sponge. Day 5 is the last of the 3 days that I loved my foundation. I honestly, at the end of the night, thought this was the greatest foundation that I had ever tried. If I could get the results that I got day 5 and of the night earlier in the day, this would be the only foundation I would ever wear for the rest of my life. The only thing I did differently that day was take a bath because I wasn't feeling well, and I feel like the steam must have helped my oils come through a lot sooner, or maybe the steam just helped melt it into my face better. But I can't believe how nice the foundation looks right now. On day 6, I built up the coverage from medium to full. I do feel like you need to work it up a little bit. I mainly felt like I was getting like high light coverage, maybe low medium coverage. I never really felt like it covered my redness, and it never fully covered the freckles that I have on my chin. But it does claim to be a buildable medium to full coverage, so I did want to put it to the test and what it would look like since it's supposed to be a comfortable full coverage. Let me tell you, it's cake. It looks nice on camera and from afar, but if you were up close next to me, it is just cake. And it felt extremely heavy. I could not wait for the end of the day to wash off all of my makeup. My eyebrows still look fantastic. As for the foundation, I am less happy with it. On day 7, I did half my face using the Fenty foundation and the other half of my face using the Smith & Colt foundation. Both are hydrating medium coverage, so I felt like they were good to test against each other. And the Smith & Colt is also a foundation that I reach for pretty often. And I like to apply it with my fingers, and it works fantastic. just so you know. The Fenty Beauty, no matter how long I wore it during any of my wear tests, never truly dried down and was never transfer proof. For today's makeup, I do have the Fenty foundation again mixed with the 110 and the 150. I used the original Beauty Blender to do my entire face, and I do like how it ended up looking. It took about 1 pump of each foundation. I don't think the fastest or the best way to get the foundation to look nice is by using the Beauty Blender. I think that ultimately the foundation looks nicer, faster, using a brush. As I'm sure you picked up on, I'm not a big fan of this foundation. Before I fully dive into my thoughts on the foundation and give you my pros and cons on my experience, I want to first tell you what Sephora's website says about the Fenty Beauty Hydrating Foundation. This foundation retails for $35 at Sephora exclusively. You get 1.08 fluid ounces, and it comes in 50 shades. It's meant to be a hydrating, long-wear, natural finish foundation with medium to buildable full coverage and is meant for normal, dry, and combo skin. You want to use 1 to 2 pumps with a brush for full coverage and 1 pump with a sponge for medium coverage. My skin is normal to dry, leaning dry most days. Starting with the things that I like about the foundation. I do really like the natural finish. It definitely does have a nice radiant glow. The dew and glow that you're seeing on my forehead and under my eyes and kind of around the center of my face, that's all from the foundation. Even as a medium coverage foundation, it did do a good job at covering my dark circles. In the shades 110 and 150, I didn't notice any kind of oxidizing. I did notice that the longer I wore the foundation, it did look better on my skin. Not all days did it emphasize texture. It wore really nicely on my nose, which is not something I can say for a lot of foundations. It was relatively long wearing. I did not notice any extreme patchiness as the day wore on, and really only saw wear down on places I would expect wear down, such as along my jawline, my chin, and on my nose. But even then, of the places that wore down, my nose was not a huge problem. I didn't think that the foundation was heavily scented. If I went and smelled the foundation right from the tube, then yes, there was a scent. Applying it on my face and wearing it, I didn't smell anything. I really loved the way that the foundation looked the most after I used the flat top kabuki and finished it off with the Beauty Blender. I also really liked the application using the super sponge. Now that I finished going over the things I liked about the foundation, I'm going to talk about the things that I didn't like about it. First of all, I want to get this out of the way, that for being a hydrating foundation, it's not very hydrating. My face definitely felt dry and tight throughout the day when wearing this foundation. The shades oxidized. I know that shades 110 and 150 didn't oxidize, but 160 turned orange. I definitely found that it cakes easily. Even when I wasn't trying to go to full coverage and just adding a little bit of coverage on like my redness or my freckled area, it was very easy to over apply and get that immediate cake face look. It never dried down completely. It was always a little bit tacky, and it definitely transferred and clung to my dry patches. I like to glow, I like to look wet, and I felt like it took way too long in the foundation wear to get there. The shade that I found that matches closest to me, the 150N, is green when I apply it. In all the foundations out there on the market right now, don't think that I should settle for one where the shade that matches me makes me feel green. It took 3 pumps of foundation to get any kind of coverage on my skin using the Beauty Blender. It never takes me 3 pumps of foundation to get any kind of coverage. I also think that it looks patchy when applied with the Beauty Blender, and the coverage is incredibly inconsistent. I don't think that you get the same coverage. I don't think that you get the same finish if you use a Beauty Blender. I also found throughout the 7 days that I had to use an inconsistent amount of foundation to get what I wanted. On day 1, to get the coverage, it was 3 pumps of foundation. Day 4 was 1.5 pumps of foundation. I needed 2 or 2.5 pumps on other days. It's 1.08 fluid ounces of foundation. So if you're using 2 or 3 pumps every time you use this foundation, you're gonna go through this so quickly. I've only used maybe 6 pumps total from this bottle, and you can already see the dent that I've made in the foundation. It feels so heavy on the face. Even though I'm happy with how my makeup looks right now, I do get the feeling looking at myself that I could just take the mask off of my face. It doesn't melt into my skin. It's something that makes me feel so uncomfortable that I can't wait to go wash my face. The last thing that I don't like about this foundation is that it doesn't play well with others. I had to change certain products in my skincare routine because I found throughout the wear test that my normal products were reacting very poorly when I put this foundation on. It was so interesting to see the difference in how the foundation wore after I changed my routine versus when I use the routine that I use every day. If I need to blend on top of the foundation, I do have to set the area that I want to blend on top of, and the problem with that is, how do I know how the foundation is wearing if I have setting powder on it? Ultimately, that's why I ended up doing the wear test with no other products. I felt like I couldn't accurately review the foundation if I was covering my face in powders. I wanted to make sure that I was testing the foundation formula itself and not just the powder products that I put on top of it. I originally wasn't drawn to this foundation release, but because a subscriber requested a review on some Fenty base product, I was like, hey, this is a great thing to try out because it checks a lot of the boxes that I have when looking for a foundation. I think first impressions can be very helpful, but I also think they can be very misleading. I felt like doing a 7-day wear test was more beneficial for me and ultimately for you because I really got a chance to see how this foundation worked in my daily life. I know from wearing it on multiple occasions now that it's not something that I want to fit in to my collection. I only enjoyed the way my foundation looked 3 out of 7 days. While this foundation does get a pass from me, that does not mean that it's a bad foundation. It just means that it didn't work for me and my skin, but I am sure that there are a lot of skin tones and skin types that will find benefit from this formula. So I'm going to continue my hunt for the perfect foundation. Let me know down below what your thoughts are. Did you like the foundation? Have you picked it up? Do you think I'm totally off base? I want to know what you think. In case you missed it, hi, my name is Katie, and you can catch me most often on Instagram. Don't miss an upload. Subscribe and ring the bell so you'll be notified on Sundays and Wednesdays when I upload. Thank you for being here, and I'll catch you on Sunday with my next video when we go through my trash and check out my empties.